I had a pile of money that was about 3.5, 4 foot tall, 9 feet long, and weighed over a ton. The F-250 van that I was loading, the armored van, when I started, the back bumper was pretty high up on me. When I was done, it was pretty low.
Right.
If I do this, I'm going to take enough money so that I won't have to ever come back, because I won't be able to.
So you're out of the country before they even know the place has been robbed.
I'm eating lunch in Mexico by the time the news breaks.
Loomis was robbed, and these two knuckleheads were living in a double wide. They just bought a multi-million-dollar mansion in this small town with cash.
Yeah.
They're driving expensive vehicles, and the guy's a knucklehead, you know, and somehow or another he's come up with all this cash.
Yeah. And they've decided they're going to kill me.
Right.
And he's got a buddy, McKinney, and they're going to hire him. He's going to go down to Mexico and kill me.
Hey, this is Matt Cox, and I am here with David Gant. David Gant was, should I say bank robber? No, bank robber or
That's usually the
Is that what
title I end up with.
yeah, bank robber for Loomis Fargo. One of the largest Loomis Fargo robberies in history. It was $17.5 million. And it was, they say this over and over again, that it was literally a ton of cash. And so we're going to do an interview, and I appreciate you guys watching. And so check this out. Like we were saying, I was saying earlier, I actually, and I know I'm recapping all this, but I actually, prior to getting in trouble myself, watched a program on you, and then I watched another one where I think I was incarcerated, and then I was, and it always reminded me of a story that I wrote in prison, and I kept going back to your story because the story I wrote was very similar to yours. But it's one of those stories that always stuck in my mind. So when like my booking agent and my girlfriend got in touch with you, my wife got in touch with you and my booking agent, like I immediately, usually people have to tell me like, you know, I'm like, who is this guy? Can you send me a link? I don't know who that is. He did what? But as soon as they mentioned it, no, he did this. I was like, oh, I know exactly who you're talking about. I remember watching a documentary. Like I was immediately excited. That's why my wife kept texting. I was like, you've got to get this guy to come on here. Like he's got a great story. So anyway, that's kind of how I knew the whole thing. So basically what I typically do is just start at the beginning. We're not in a hurry or anything. So, you know, like where were you born?
Okay. I was born in Gastonia, North Carolina, and on October 20th, 1969. Really average, upper middle class, lower middle class family, good education, just a normal Southern upbringing.
Right.
Hunting, fishing, motorcycles, nothing out of the ordinary.
Right. And then you ended up going into the military?
Yeah. My hometown, Gastonia, at the time was, what's a good word? They were economically not very diverse, and so I didn't have a lot of options, I felt. And so I went into the military and became a Apache crew chief.
All right. Were you in, did you see any action or? What year was this, by the way? Sorry.
Let's see, that was 89 or so. And I went to Desert Shield, Desert Storm, came back, and things at home really hadn't changed. And got married, and I spent some time down in Hilton Head Island, South Carolina, working at a fixed base operation, which is a airplane refueling operation.
Was that for the military?
Nope, this was a private one.
This is after you got out.
After I got out, and eventually, my wife at the time I usually say she got homesick, but we went back to Gastonia, and there was hardly anything for me. And one day I saw an ad in the newspaper, armored car guard, top dollar paid, which was a huge fib. And I put in an application, and next thing I knew, they hired me and put me to work.
I mean, those guys never, like, for the amount, for the responsibility, like, they get paid horrible.
Oh yeah.
You know, like, it may be top dollar for that field, but that field is notorious for having a horrible pay scale. Do you like the guy that I had written the story about? His name was Jamal, and he got a concealed weapons permit, and he said a concealed weapons permit and a few months as a security guard. He said having like 90 days, or I think it was like 6 months as a security guard and having his concealed weapons permit. He's like, that was all the qualifications I needed. That and not being a felon. I mean, did you need a security?
Yeah. They run a credit check on you. They do a felony background check. They make you take a firearms course. And it's always amazed me what those guys and ladies get paid to be responsible for a huge armored truck. And then all the paperwork involved. You're dealing with professional customers every day. You might go to 100 stops, a day, and they pay them peanuts.
He's been known to cure insecurity just with his laugh. His organ donation card lists his charisma. His smile is so contagious. Vaccines have been created for it. He is the most interesting man in the world.
I don't typically commit crime, but when I do, it's bank fraud. Stay greedy, my friends.
Support the channel. Join Matthew Cox's Patreon.
So you got the job, and the job, it's broken up into, I mean, I just know from having written that story, it's broken up to everybody has a different responsibility, right? Like you've got the driver, you've got the runner, you've got the loader, or something, like the guy that loads the machines or something. I mean,
yeah, the ATM people. The basic jobs that you would find at Armored Car Company is the very basic is the driver. He knows the route, knows nothing much else. He runs the radio, and then you have what we called him a messenger. He's the guy that goes into the bank, and he does all the paperwork. He knows the route forwards and backwards, knows all of his customers, knows which keys they need, and he's basically the boss of the truck. And then a third one would be the ATM guys, and they fill up all the ATMs. There's a myriad of other things behind the scenes.
But they're not those, like the ATM guys and the messenger and driver, like they're not going out at the same time, right? Like they're on two different routes, right?
Yeah,
like,
they're usually on different routes. The ATM guys usually keep to themselves.
Okay. And once you get the money, you go back to like a warehouse, like a secured warehouse, and unload the money, and they count the money. And
there's a whole separate crew that counts all the money. They have a money room, and the messenger, he never actually touches raw cash money. Never. It's always bagged with an address, never an amount. And
right.
So you get your manifest in the morning, you load your truck, triple check everything, sign it off, and you go out on your route.
But you started as a messenger.
No, I started off as a driver.
Oh, okay.
I drove the Hickory Run for close to a year. Hickory's a little town up north of Charlotte.
Okay. And so when did you I thought you said you had become a messenger, or then you went to
Yeah, there was I'll call it an incident at Wells Fargo, and I ended up becoming a messenger and then later a vault superintendent.
What was that, like layoffs, or was that the layoffs, or?
Yeah, they had a large layoff, and a lot of people, we were really shorthanded, and a lot of people got promoted. I probably got promoted. I probably should have never been promoted probably past driver. To be brutally honest, I was really good at being a driver. I understood the route. I knew all the safety procedures, and I was really good at it. And I probably should have never went past that.
So I have a question because, like I said, the only reason I know this is like, is money come up missing before? Does it just come up missing sometimes?
I'm sure it does. Usually the biggest thing was they would lose coins because they have them boxed up. And one of our horror stories was bad rainstorm, guy got caught in, was out taking in a load of coin. The boxes got wet, busted, coins go everywhere. And they had to go out there with brooms and sweep it all up.
The guy, Jamal, that I did the story on, he told me that one time a guy came and turned in the bags, right? Like, here's, the messenger came in, here's the bags, gave him. He said he scanned them all in, and like the manifest or whatever, he's like, okay, you're missing a bag. You're missing like $60,000. And he said, and the guy had been there like 3 years. And he was like, no. And he goes, yeah. He said, yeah, look. Shows him, and he goes, huh. So he goes back, and he goes, let me check the truck. Goes back in, checks the truck. Comes back. He goes, it's not in the truck. He goes, are you sure? He goes, I'm just telling you. It says you're supposed to have 8 bags. You got 7. Like, and he's like, oh, wow. And he said, okay. He said, so he makes a note. He said, I guess they'll figure it out later. I don't know. He said, he made a note, turned it in, explained the whole thing. Guy went home. Guy came back the next day. They talked to him. He's like, no, I mean, yeah. They said, they called the branch. They were like, you picked it up. He's like, well, it should be here. It just acted like, I don't know. And he ended up not getting, like, they didn't fire him. They were like, it's just, I don't know what happened. They kept him on. Like, he had just lost, I want to say it was $60,000, but it may have been 30. I know there was 2 different events. Then he said that, like, they literally kept him on. He goes, listen, he was about 2 weeks later, he shows up on a brand new $12,000 motorcycle. And I was like, no. He said, I swear. He goes, I remember looking at him going, nice bike. And he goes, yeah, you like that? And just kept on walking, like, yeah. And he's like, I just took him for this. Nothing happened to him. Now, another time he said there was a woman, same basic thing, but she had pulled up. And so when they checked when she showed up, same thing, I'm missing money. They were like, that's weird. They went back and checked the surveillance, and she had stopped the vehicle, got out, went to her car, and came back. And they were like, no, something's wrong. So they actually called the police, went to her car, and found the money. She was fired. Yeah. And he goes, but the thing is, he's like, they recovered the money. He goes, they just fired her. They didn't press charges or anything.
Because they don't want the publicity.
Right.
They don't want that in the news. They don't want to be in the news at all. One of the things I do remember is we had a messenger. He went all around. He went for like 5 or 6 stops on his route. And I think there was like $175,000 cash. There was a little spot on the back bumper. And this bag, big cloth bag, fit right in that little nook.
Right.
And he rode around, I think it was Mooresville. I'm not sure. But it's somewhere in western North Carolina. He rode around for like an hour and a half with $175,000 on the back on the bumper of the truck. Just.
Did he stop? Did it fall off? Did he stop and notice it? Or
when he got to his next stop, he noticed. And, but it
wow. I mean,
yeah.
Well, so I mean, I know, I think obviously what they want to do is they want the public to feel like, hey, this is a super secure industry. We dot all our I's, we cross all our T's. It's super secure. Everybody's paid well. Everybody's trained. They're all professional. But the truth is, that's not what's really happening.
Yeah. Basically, on that, the emperor has no clothes.
Right.
You go to I look back on it now, and the gun training we got was poor. You're firing an old. They used a .38 special back then. And the range is maybe 7-8 feet to the target, and it's a huge. It's bigger than life-size target, and you only need to hit it about 8 out of 10 times. And everybody gets to fire a shotgun, and it's It's a really sad joke.
It's he was saying, the guy I had interviewed, he was like, they tell you like give up the money. Like if you're in a crowded place, give up the money. Like we don't want pedestrians shot. We don't get into a gunfight. If somebody shows up, pulls a gun, you're in a crowded place, give up the money immediately. Do what they say. You got a better chance of survival, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Blah.
But they basically tell you run away.
Yeah.
And if the driver is watching you, because they're supposed to watch you in the mirror, not all of them do. He sees you run away, he's supposed to drive away as well.
Oh, okay.
That way, you lose that one stop.
Right.
And that's it.
Okay. So I mean, what happened? You're working there, and you're working overtime. You're not making great pay. You're married. Is your wife work?
Yeah, my wife at the time worked.
Okay. Did you have kids?
No kids.
Okay.
What happened was over time, the stress of the job and the stress of my life. We just bought a house, 2 new cars, and we're getting by. But as long as I keep working long hours, we'll be fine. And that started to wear on me. And, I probably had other issues from before, and it starts to build up. And I got desperate. And then when they came and suggested this to me, it looked like a way out.
Right. Who suggested it?
Kelly Campbell and her friend.
Chris?
No, it wasn't Chris. It was. I'm probably going to get hate mail now for not remembering the guy's name. Chambers.
Oh, Chambers.
Yeah.
John Chambers, or what was his first name?
Oh hell.
Chambers. Something Chambers.
Chambers.
Yeah, I just watched earlier. I can picture him. He was like a thought he was like a mob guy or something, but he was actually just a small time kind of petty crook. He'd been in prison before too, right? Didn't he get in trouble?
I don't know.
Yeah, well, I know that what they said was he had actually he'd actually had problems with the law before, and I believe they said he had a federal case before. I don't know if he did prison time, but he definitely had like a federal case.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never really cared enough to dig.
You know what's funny is that just talking to you, like I would meet guys in prison, and some guys would come to me and say, "Hey, this guy's got an amazing story. You have to hear his story." And then we'd go and we'd sit down and talk, and I'd take notes and just to see if it was worth writing a story. And they didn't know a ton of stuff about their case. Like they never looked into it. Like they got sentenced. They knew they got 5 years. I got to do 5 years. And then they just kicked back and they walked the track. They joined a softball game. Maybe they learned to play an instrument. They read books. They're like, I'm just going to whittle away this time. And they never looked into it. Some guys didn't look into it because they were just like, I can't believe I'm here. I don't want to think about it. And other guys, I just don't think that they realized they could look into it. And so I would interview these guys, and they didn't. If I decided to write their story, I would order the Freedom of Information Act on them. I'd get their case file. I'd get all the notes and the interviews, and I would be able to come to them and say, here's what happened. Remember you said this and you didn't know why that was? Here's what happened. And then I tell them what the FBI file said. This person got arrested. He cooperated. He told this guy. They contacted the FBI, and that's why they were waiting for you. But, so you not knowing I'm not laughing at you. It's like I'm amazed because I'm so super inquisitive about everything. I would have been that whole 5 years or however much time, you did, I would have been looking into it the whole time.
Yeah. I think my attitude was, it doesn't really concern me. I really don't care.
You just wanted to get
I just want to do my time.
Right.
And I spent most of my time playing softball, reading books. I studied a lot of psychology books, and I must have read 15, 20 self-help books because I came to a realization that there was something slightly wrong with me and we needed to address that.
Yeah, that this was an option.
Because
for most people, which always kills me, is like as desperate as they get, and I get the desperation because I'm kind of like in this, I mention this to my wife all the time. I'm like, listen, like we're a bad car accident or a medical issue where, if anything goes wrong, we go down like the Titanic. Maybe we can go for a month or two, but that's it. And that worries me. And so I get exactly what you're saying, but what most people don't think is, hey, I can do this. Most people don't think I can commit a crime and correct this issue. And, I think obviously that's what separates people, obviously, criminals or people that have criminal intent. I think anybody will commit a crime in the right situation. But to me, one of my first thought is fraud. Here's how I'll fix it. Fraud, and then I have to, now I realize, it's probably what you probably do is work a little harder, cut back a little bit more. But Kelly came to you.
Yeah. And she proposed the thought, how do you feel about robbing Fargo? And she knew I wasn't real keen on the company.
Right.
Because we'd had a superintendent or manager threaten my job, and thought I'm thinking about going away anyway. And I said, it really wouldn't be that hard. It's just a matter of what day, and understanding that the weekend schedule it would be the easiest, and you'd have the most time to get away.
Right.
I said it'd have to be on the weekend, probably a Saturday would be easiest. That's when there'll be, back then, the Charlotte Vault had a very strict schedule. It was like every other Saturday. There was a fairly large amount of money in the vault, cash, as opposed to certain weekends it'd be 98% checks. Back when we used paper checks, back in the dinosaur days.
I still write checks. I still write them. Nobody else does.
I haven't
laughed at me.
I haven't written a paper check in. That would have been back in like 2015.
You're hipper than I am. I just got out.
Oh, I'm a big guy on convenience and utility.
So here's my my next question is, but you didn't think to yourself, yeah, we could set up a robbery, or a bag could go missing, we could get a couple $100,000. You thought, I can empty out the entire vault of $17 million and walk away clean.
Yeah.
That's a huge leap.
Well, here's my thought. If you're going to break the law,
go all in
or don't go.
Right.
Because what was that movie? I think it was Heat, where the bad guy told the cop, "See, you think I got Born to Lose tattooed on my chest? I'm robbing 7-Elevens? No.
Right.
And I'd seen that movie prior to doing this. I'm like, he's got a point.
That is one of my favorite movies, by the way.
It is, from my point of view as prior military, and seeing the gunfight, the gun battle, that's probably one of the coolest running gun battles you'll ever see in a movie.
Most realistic,
and
too.
very realistic,
extremely realistic.
Yeah, because they're actually reloading, they're moving from point to point, and it goes back to military. If you're not shooting, you need to be moving. If you're not moving, you need to be reloading.
Yeah, De Niro and Pacino. That's a great movie. I want to watch that movie again. So how long does it take before you decide, you know what, this is, clearly your wife's not going to be okay with it.
Oh no, I knew that she would lose her shit if I'd have mentioned it. And I thought, and I come to the realization that I'm going to have to walk away from everything, and I'm weighing it in my head. This goes on for 4 or 5 days. And I go, all right, I'm going to go for it. I've never done anything outrageous in my life. This is it. I'm going to change my life. I'm going to probably end up down in Costa Rica, sitting on a beach, fishing, and that's where I want to go. That's what I'm going to do.
Were you thinking about changing your identity, or how are you going to get out of the country? Is any of that a concern?
And, well, I thought about it backwards. I thought, where do I want to go? how am I going to get there? And I looked into the Cayman Island banks. I looked into Costa Rica. And I looked at the FBI and some crime statistics. And I figured, okay, most criminals stay in like a 3 or 500 mile circle of their home. The cops catch a lot of people at their mama's house.
Right.
Okay. Because when people know they've done something wrong, they want to feel safe, and they don't want to leave that little bubble. I'm like, okay, if I get outside that bubble, my chances increase. So I've got to get out of the country as quickly as possible. And
well, I mean, for one thing, just leaving your home is gutsy.
Yeah.
I mean, people don't realize that. They don't. You know, you have to walk away from everything every comfort, everything that makes you feel comfortable. You have to leave, and most people don't leave. 95% of the country never leaves the United States. You know, half those ever leave even the state that they live in. You know, so it's you're picking up, leaving, not calling, not coming back, not just walking away from everything like that alone. Even if you weren't already wanted,
yeah,
and you know that's already gutsy. So my other question is, did you think that there was going to be heat on you? Did you think that the media would get, were you thinking this will be in the news, or did you think, oh, there'll be an article and that'll be it?
I knew it would be a big story,
Okay.
especially for that area, because even before I really came up with a solid plan, what I thought was a solid plan, I knew about how much money it would be. I knew it would be more than 10 and less than 20 million. And I knew that would be a huge story.
There had been a Loomis Fargo had been robbed like a year or two earlier of like 18 million. Did you know about that?
Yeah, it was big news. Matter of fact, it was I can't remember if he robbed the Tallahassee branch or the Jacksonville branch.
Jacksonville, I think.
Yeah, it was the Jacksonville branch, which is where I live now. So, and I've met that guy.
Really?
At the time he was a little messed up, but
You met him after?
Oh no, I met him like in passing in prison.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, okay. But he was a completely different type thing. He kidnapped the dude and
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah,
Okay.
it was a mess. But I think he beat me by a few million.
Right. Yeah, his was like 18. I want to say, because I remember thinking it was roughly about 1 million more. And I was thinking yours was 17. It was 17.5. But I was thinking 17. I think they said 18. So I remember thinking it was about 1 million. It was roughly 1 million. Okay. So what about Kelly? Like, why? Like, everything I saw, they said you and Kelly were close. That you guys hung out together.
When I first started at Fargo, I was friends with her driver. All the drivers kind of hang out together, and so I ended up talking to Kelly, and I ended up driving for her for quite a while, and we just hit it off.
Okay, so when she came to you, you just trusted her, you were friends, but she wasn't there anymore, though, right?
Yeah, she had quit, got fired. I'm not really sure. Once again, it's one of those things where it didn't concern me. I didn't look into it.
So you decided you were going to do it. You talked to her.
And
What was the plan?
the basic plan was for them to get me a fake ID, which we did, which back then was way easier. And what I would do was we'd pick a Saturday, and I would basically empty the vault. At first, they only wanted me to take, I think he said 250,000, and then he came back, I'll get 1 or 2 million. I'm like, no, we're not doing that. If I do this, I'm going to take enough money so that I won't have to ever come back, because I won't be able to.
Okay.
And as it worked out, the original plan was I wanted to get at least 15, which worked out pretty good. And it was like, here's your 5. Here's your 5. Just make sure you deliver my 5. Anything that's left after that, you can have. You can keep it. I only want my 5. And they were, oh, yeah, that'd be great. And I didn't know that they were already planning to vote me off the island.
Right.
So,
This is like almost 30 years ago?
close to it, yeah.
$5
It was in
million
97.
30 years ago.
Yeah.
That's a ton of money.
Imagine if we'd have got that money to the Cayman Islands back then. Because back then the Cayman Islands were wide open and paying really good interest.
Geez, you could have gotten it. I mean, they would have issued you a citizenship and a passport probably with just
Yeah.
like, I mean, they've got St. Kitts right now. I think if you just buy a piece of property for like $350,000, they'll give you a passport. They'll make you an economic. They have economic
citizen. Yeah.
So what happened? So that day you just decide, hey, you guys are gonna be waiting. I'll let you know when you grab the money, and what happened?
So I picked October the 4th. I knew about what was going to be in the vault, and went into work just normal.
Right.
I think we met 1 or 2 more times, and we made a run to get my big quote unquote fake ID, which was just a state ID.
Yeah, I was gonna say the FBI, when they interviewed like your friends, your wife, friends from the military, like every single one of them, your wife too, she was like, no, like nothing has changed. Like he is, on a schedule. He's always the same, behaved like you didn't vary, like even made like a doctor's appointment or a dentist appointment or something. You had even made like an appointment for like the week or 2 prior to that. Like you were going to be there, like everything, like there's nothing that says this guy should not have come home that day. And everything, went to the grocery store, did this, did that, whatever, walked the dog, took the garbage out, like didn't argue. There was no fight. There was nothing, like everything and everything was the same. And all of your buddies were like, this is absolutely 100% uncharacteristic of this guy. This is a guy that follows the rules. This is a hard worker. This guy's conscientious. This is, they said if there was anything, I remember one of the guys had said that if there was anything abnormal about you at all, they said he's kind of a loner. Yeah. That was it. Like that's like the worst. That's like the worst thing they could say about you. But, he's kind of a loner. Like so, which I guess is to say he is the kind of guy that he's not afraid to be alone or walk away. A lot of guys have to be social.
Yeah,
that was it.
I've never been a social butterfly.
Yeah, that's. So this was just totally out of character for you.
And now that I'm much older, I had to be a cold-hearted SOB. I had to be. That was the only way. You had to put on that mask and wear it all the way to the door. Because if I'd acted any different, the whole world would have known.
Right.
Because I did have a schedule. I went to bed at the same time. I got up. I carried 2 sandwiches, an apple or some fruit. It was almost like I had some weird OCD, because I carried the same thing for lunch almost all the time. And I'm still that way. I love to have a schedule. Like being late today aggravated me. You have no idea. And it was everything that was completely out of my control.
Right.
Because I like to be on time. It's I don't know if it's from the way I was raised, but there's something about, if I say I'm going to be here at noon, I'm going to be there at 11:45 usually.
Yeah, it's funny. My dad and I actually say the same thing, is that being on time is being 15 minutes early.
Yeah.
But you were only like 10 minutes late. So you went into work and the trucks come in, you count the money, you check it in. What were you doing that day? Just checking it in?
I was in charge of the vault, and in the morning I made sure everybody got all their load out in the morning. Make sure they had all their paperwork, sent them out, and then the rest of the day you're pretty much sitting there listening to the radio, listening to the company radio for the trucks. If they have a problem, they call in. You're basically just sitting there scratching your butt.
Right.
until they start coming back. And they call Kelly and them. They must have called me out how many times. Are you sure you're going to go through with this? I'm like, yeah. Don't worry about me. You know, when I tell you I'm coming out the door, I'm coming out the door. And finally the truck started coming back, and we had a guy that he was a messenger, and they had said, hey, we want you to stay with Dave, kind of learn it, and he'll be in charge, and he'll show you what to do. And worked with him. Great guy, though. I kind of hate I did that to him. But finally got to the last bit. I said, hey, man, if you want to take off, it's going to take me a while. If you want to take on off, I got you covered. So he leaves, and I lock up everything. I don't set the timer on the vault, nothing. I don't spin the big wheel on it. I lock up. Go out. I see his taillights going around the corner. I turn back around, go right back in the building. Disarm the security system, move my van, and this is kind of where the plan goes to shit. Because I had planned on, there was 2 doors, they were offset, one at the front, one at the back, and I was planning on going out the back entrance, and for some reason, I'll get to that, but for some reason it wasn't working that night. It didn't work that night, so I had to go. But anyway, I pushed the first bin out there, and it was mostly small bills. And by the time I was done, I had a pile of money that was about 3.5, 4 foot tall, 9 feet long, and weighed over a ton. The F-250 van that I was loading, the armored van, when I started, the back bumper was pretty high up on me. When I was done, it was pretty low.
Right. So then this is after every truck's already come in, dropped off the money, and gone.
Yeah, all the trucks are done.
Nobody's coming back.
Nobody's supposed to be coming back. Anything.
You're just there alone.
I'm there alone.
So you loaded up the truck. You get in the truck and you just.
Yeah. And I had scouted out and found the security VHS tapes, and I'd secured 2 or 3 of them, and I missed one somehow. They had another recorder up in the ceiling.
Yeah, right.
And I didn't get that one.
Yeah, I was gonna say they show the footage of that one.
Yeah.
Where they're like, I guess when eventually you leave, and they call in saying something's wrong.
Yeah.
When they show back up the next day or later that, I think it was the next day. They show up the next day, and people start calling in. Your wife's calling in. People are calling in. They say, he didn't show up. And everything's open.
Yeah.
So they're like, it's completely wide open. When the FBI or the detectives come, and the FBI, they find that tape, and I guess they had to wait for a manager or somebody to come and open the back to find the tape. But when they find it,
yeah,
the manager, or I don't know what he was, I'll say the manager of the place, when he saw that it was you, because they assumed you'd been kidnapped, somebody had taken the money, kidnapped you. They were concerned that you were hurt, because he certainly had nothing to do with it. And so when they saw you, they said, like, the manager, you got to watch it. The manager is like, oh my God. He's like, that's David Gantz. That's David. That's like, they were like, he kept, the FBI officers, like, he kept saying it over and over, like, oh my God. Like, he was absolutely in shock.
Yeah.
That he was watching you load this vehicle.
And to buy myself time, I stole almost all their keys.
Right. Yeah, that slowed them down a lot. Slowed them down also when they eventually found the truck.
Yeah.
Law enforcement often questions him, not because he's suspected of a crime, but because they find him fascinating. He is the most interesting man in the world.
I don't typically commit crime, but when I do, it's bank fraud. Stay greedy, my friends.
Support the channel. Join Matthew Cox's Patreon.
So what happened when you left there? Where did you go when you left with the truck?
let's see, what was the name of that place? It was some sort of aluminum recycling place where we met, and they had rigged the gate that when I pulled up, it would open. And I got out, and this guy comes walking up on me. And he says, don't worry, I'm with you. Just give me the keys. And I hand him the keys, and this becomes important later. I say, this is the keys to the van. They open all the doors. Don't put it in the box, the big box of keys. Okay, because I had a box in between the front seats filled with every key in Wells Fargo.
Okay.
We'll come back around to this. This becomes important later. And I've already got my little bit of money I'm going to take with me because I didn't know how much money I could get through a metal detector with at the airport. I was unsure, so I didn't take that much money. So Kelly and I get in her truck and we go to Columbia, South Carolina, where they've got an airport. I didn't know at the time that their airport closed at like 9. So I ended up scrapping plan A, go on plan B, hop on a bus in Columbia, South Carolina, go from Columbia, South Carolina to Atlanta, Georgia, hop on a plane in Atlanta, from Atlanta to New Orleans to Cancun, Mexico.
And back then you didn't need a passport, right?
Didn't need a passport.
So you're out of the country before they even know the place has been robbed.
I'm eating lunch in Mexico about the time the news breaks.
So what was they were supposed to get you $5 million.
$5 million, yes.
Okay. And how much did you leave with?
Probably about 45 or 50,000, thereabouts.
Okay. So when did you first see that it was on the news?
I had to, since I was in Mexico, I had to actually kind of dig, and I found, what was it? I found a newsstand they had, might have been the New York Times. And they had, it didn't make the front page, not for them. And I found a little blurb about it. I thought, okay, we're good. Because I didn't think it was that big of a story. I thought, all right, good. I mean, I knew the FBI would be after me, but I didn't think that, I was pretty sure they wouldn't go digging into Mexico hard.
Right. But it became bigger later, right? Like it didn't, when they started looking.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that takes us back to, the van that they left with $3 million in it, I think it was.
Yeah, they had an issue moving there was such a bulk because most of the money was in 20s, right?
Yeah.
So there was so much mass to it that they couldn't move it all.
Yeah.
And they left like $3.5 million in the. What kills me is that they didn't come back for it.
Yeah.
Like they just left it.
Yeah. Why would you leave money on the table? So
Right. Exactly. Why wouldn't you? I mean, go remove the money, dump the money that you've got, come back. Nobody even knows it's gone yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they weren't the brightest.
No, they weren't. And to be honest, neither was I. But
well, I mean, so do you know what the issues were once you were in Mexico? Do you know what the issue? Why they got onto them so quickly? I mean, you were saying you've never really watched any of this stuff.
Well, my guess is this: we live in a small town. If you go from a double wide,
right,
to a multi-million-dollar mansion,
paying cash,
and you go from driving a hoopty to driving a Beamer. You go from a cubic zirconium to an actual diamond, people notice.
Yeah.
And this guy tried to pass himself off as a former professional football player.
Right.
And I don't know what you know about a lot of football fans, and people are rabid fans about their football.
Yeah.
They knew he wasn't a cowboy, from any season.
Yeah, his wife was telling her. So they actually moved from the small town where they were in. They moved to not far from where the Loomis building, where you'd rob the Loomis building, and it was already a little town, but it happened to have this really nice gated community, and they bought that house there with cash. And when I say with cash, I don't mean like, we typically people will say, "Oh, I paid for it cash." Doesn't mean you paid for it in one lump sum with a check. It's literally this guy paid in cash.
Yeah.
So that raised huge red flags.
Oh yeah, it would.
His wife, what was his name again?
Oh, Chambers.
Chambers' wife. Shoot, if I thought you were going to know all these, or I would have written a list down. So his wife starts trying to launder the money, and literally walks into a bank, opens up a bag of cash, and says, "How much of this can I deposit before I have to fill out the paperwork for the government?" And the woman says, like, well, up to 10,000. She goes, okay. She goes, listen, it's not drug money. Like everything that you could have said that is going to get a suspicious activity report filed on you, you've just said. Drug money. How much? What's the maximum limit that nobody won't be reported? I mean, everything that right then, it's like, this is so overly suspicious. And of course, they immediately fill out a report. And not just that, but people start calling. Friends of theirs start calling saying, or, friends starts calling saying, listen, Loomis was robbed, and these two knuckleheads were living in a double wide. They just bought a multi-million-dollar mansion in this small town with cash.
Yeah.
They're driving expensive vehicles, and the guy's a knucklehead, and somehow or another he's come up with all this cash.
Yeah.
So immediately the FBI get onto them.
Oh yeah.
Very quickly.
And it's no surprise to me.
Right. And then they watched them for a while, and it became so overwhelming that something was wrong, they convinced a federal judge to allow them to start listening to their phone calls. And then they had watched long. The FBI officer said, "Look, we listened long enough that the search warrant is only good for so long.
Yeah.
That it was about to expire. Whether it was they got a 30-day or 60, I don't know. But it was just about to expire when Kelly received a page or a phone call from you, and you had scheduled a time, and one, you needed more money.
Mm-hmm.
So they were trying to arrange to send you more money. And two, they had arranged a time for you to call a payphone. But she wasn't there. She missed the appointment or something because, I guess she had better things to do than try and maintain the robbery, which is a big problem for criminals. They once they get the money, they forget about maintenance. So, but I guess they said the FBI was waiting. They had a tap on the phone. You called. She wasn't there. One of the FBI officers walks over because they needed to hear you.
Yeah.
Walked over, grabbed the phone, and listened and said, "Hey, hello." And then you said something on the phone where they heard your voice, and then they were like, I forget. I think he said you said something. You had a little brief exchange, and they hung up the phone, but they were like, "That's him. Like we've got him." But you hung up so fast they couldn't get a trace.
Yeah. One of the things that's never come out in any of the interviews is I'm on the other end and I'm timing our phone calls. I bought a really expensive watch just for this. It was one of the extravagances I did. I bought a nice Omega, what was it? Dive Master. My memory's stretched thin, but it was a nice Omega watch. And I'm watching the time every time we talk, and I'm keeping it around 2 to 3 minutes.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, now they'd know where you were immediately, but back then,
then it took them
time to trace it, especially out of the country.
Oh yeah, back then, this goes back to me doing my research. I found out that they could trace a phone, but it took them 2.5 to 3 minutes.
Right.
And like I said, outside the country even longer because they've got to contact the country and dealing with the Mexican government back then would have been a nightmare, I'm sure.
So what were you thinking when you're in Cancun?
Mm-hmm.
You're in Cancun, you're hanging out. How long has it been? And what are you waiting for? Are you waiting for them to figure out how to bring you your money?
Yeah.
Like what's going through your head?
Well, I'm in Cancun and I'm moving from place to place, and I'm starting to get concerned that this should have been easy. You can smuggle anything you want into Mexico.
Yeah.
Easy. Going south, easy. Easy as pie. And I'm like, all you had to do is box it up. Send it UPS. Easy peasy.
Stick it in a car. They're not stopping cars going into Mexico. You just drive down here.
Yeah. Could have bought a hoopty, an old station wagon, van, whatever. Filled it up, drove it down. Done deal. Forget about me.
So, all right, but that's not happening. What is happening? Do you?
The gist of it is they've had a meeting, and they've decided they're going to kill me.
Right.
And he's going to hire. He's got a buddy, McKinney, and they're going to hire him. He's going to go down to Mexico and kill me.
Right. And the FBI hears this.
The FBI hears this, and that's when they really start looking to figure out exactly where I'm at in Mexico.
Right. Because they have a bigger issue now.
Yeah.
Now it's not, okay, there's some missing money. We can print the money again. There's insurance. There's this,
Yeah.
that. Now somebody's going to get killed. And they realize also that, there's bigger players involved and more serious players where you were doing something that was non-violent. You were taking advantage of an opportunity. These guys are ready to start killing people. They
Yeah.
think they're gangsters.
I went out of my way to avoid violence.
Right.
I didn't, because, and I know this sounds hypocritical of me, none of that money was worth a drop of human blood.
Right.
I would have set the money on fire before I would have hurt somebody.
So at what point, or do you know that they've got their phones tapped and they're listening? Do you know what happened and how did the FBI figure out where you were?
I'm not sure exactly, but I had moved down to Cozumel and Playa del Carmen. And we're getting towards the end of it. See, that would have been January or so that year. And I'm talking to Kelly Campbell, and I hear a second click after she hangs up. And we'd had a conversation later. Listen, I told them, your phone's tapped. I heard a second click. Because that was one of the telltale signs back in the olden days that your phone was tapped. You could hang on just a second and you'd hear them hang up, you go click, and then you hear a second click.
Right.
And the tap would be broken.
Yeah. Because the line was still live. It was really like a second person holding the phone in the same room.
Yeah.
So they had to wait, and you'd hang up, and then they'd hang up.
Yeah, back then it was very analog.
Right.
And so now I'm thinking, something's not right. And McKinney had come down to Mexico and had brought me some money. Brought me like $8,000, which made me suspicious. The way he acted made me suspicious. And the cherry on top of the cake was, after he left, one of the Mexicans he was working with came by my apartment. His nickname was Gordo. He's a big guy. And he says, you know that this guy is planning on killing you. I'm like, I was shocked, and I tipped the guy handsomely.
You were shocked?
Shocked.
Okay.
I mean, because to me, it was very naive. It made no sense. There was plenty of money for everybody.
Right. Why not just pay you and just
pay me and forget about me?
I mean, they're from their perspective, and I'm only saying this because I've watched the documentaries, and the FBI agent was saying, he's like, the problem is that from their perspective, they're thinking everybody knows you took the money. Mm-hmm. Nobody knows, and from their mind, obviously the FBI does know, but they're thinking everybody knows that Gant took the money, but they don't know who we are.
Yeah.
So if he dies, then it dies with him. He took the money. They find some money. They assume he's hidden the money. They'll never get to us. Of course, they already had gotten to them, but they didn't know that. So they're thinking, cut off the head of the snake, and then the whole thing will die down. Mm-hmm. Not that I think that's a justified reason, but
you're not
it
wrong.
Was their reason.
Yeah. But I don't know. I think I took it personal for a long time, and I'm working with that. I'm processing through that feeling of disgust. But that's a whole different story.
So what happens? So the guy tells you that. What do you think? Are you thinking I'm out of here, or?
Weirdly, after this, every time I meet, he was calling himself Bruno. Every time I meet Bruno, it's in a very public place, and I've bought myself a knife and sharpened it up. Every time we meet, it's in public, it's face to face, and I don't let him, close to me. And we end up staying in Playa del Carmen. He brought me some money, and this is right there at the end of it. And I'm at the La Tortuga Hotel when the FBI picked me up.
How did that happen?
It was weird because it was a very touristy town. During the week, there's no gringos.
Right.
I was an oddball. And then when there were 3 more gringos in town, it was a little strange. And I noticed them. I even talked to one of them at one point. And eventually I'd gone out to do laundry, and they thought I was making a break for it. They thought I was running, and they caught me coming back to the hotel. And the FBI agent comes up and says, "Hey, Mr. Gant, I know who you are. You're under arrest." And that was the beginning of the end, so to speak.
Had Kelly and everybody already been arrested at that point?
Yeah, they had already arrested them, rounded them up. I think they had even got Bruno at the same time.
I want to say, and I don't know this, I do remember, and it's funny because I only watched a few bits and pieces. I'm really remembering this from seeing it 20 years ago. I want to say that Chambers, they grabbed him and he told them where you were. I could be wrong. I do know that when they grabbed him, he immediately
he immediately
rolled over on.
He rolled over like a hard-boiled egg.
Right. So he may have told them exactly where you were. For all I know, or maybe they had been tracing the phones and they had figured out by that point. I don't know. Yeah. But they grabbed you. Did they bring you to a local police station, or did they bring you straight to the airport?
No, they brought me. I spent the night with the Mexican federales, and they were going to, big air quotes here, deport me from Mexico. Okay, and they put me on an airplane flight that just happened to have 2 FBI agents.
Right. So, okay. So they don't need to extradite you.
Yeah.
So you show up back in. Where'd you fly into?
I think we went straight to Charlotte.
Okay. You're processed in by the marshals?
Marshals right there in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, and they put me on the 6th floor, which is like their version of Max.
Okay.
Because the story had exploded.
Right. So when the did they explain to you, hey, these guys, they're going to kill you?
Oh yeah. Me and the FBI agent had a long conversation. We actually became friends, oddly.
Yeah, he seemed like, look, I've watched a lot of these. Like he genuinely seemed to like you, and like I've never seen one of these where they just didn't have. They had a lot of bad things to say about Chambers.
Mm-hmm.
They really portray them as just being bumbling idiots. But none of the FBI interviews portray you as anything other than just being a nice guy who was frustrated with his situation and saw the opportunity and took it.
Yeah,
like that's how they.
And that's not far from wrong.
Right.
I see myself as an opportunist, and I think most humans are opportunists. If they
in the right circumstances.
In the right circumstances, anybody would have done what I did.
So when you come back, you have a long conversation with them. Like, what's the conversation? What?
I told him my version of the story, and he asked more and more questions. And I think one of the things that kind of impressed him about me, I'm gonna make a huge assumption here, is I explained my logic behind everything and how I looked at the crime itself, and told him about my research. And he's like, you put a lot of thought into. I'm like, yeah, you guys are easy to beat on any given day. You approach every crime the exact same way. It's a chess game. If I know that you're going to lead with your pawn out in front, and then a knight's coming behind it, I can figure out how to beat your ass.
Yeah, but you can't account for
you can't account for the 9 million other things that can go wrong.
Yeah, I always say, whenever people say, "Oh, do you ever think about crime?" I'm like, or do you think you could get away with what you did today? I always think, yeah, I can. My problem is you cannot account for the fly in the ointment.
Yeah,
like there's just no accounting for someone screwing up, or a mistake, or in this case, like had Chambers, had they gone with the plan, let's let him sit down there, wait a month or two, give him some money, wait a month or two, bring down a couple million, wait another month, bring down a couple more million, because you never know if you're going to me, I'd be afraid. What if I get pulled over by the police, they search the car, they get the money? I would have been more like, hey, let me bring you a couple million, wait a couple million, bring you the last million, and you're good. Had they done that, then maybe you do get caught later. Maybe you go to Costa Rica. Maybe something happens, you get caught later. But at least they followed that portion of the plan.
Yeah.
But but you can't account for what happened with them. Was from the very get-go they decided to double cross you.
Yeah.
How are you going to figure that out? How do you know that?
Yeah. How do you foresee that? And I look back on it in hindsight. If we'd have got that money into a Cayman bank account, all of it, and he could have lived off the interest easy. I think the interest would have been $75,000-$80,000 a year.
If there was no interest, if you put $5 million into, if you put $5 million and lived off of $50,000, you could live for $50,000 in the Cayman Islands.
Yeah,
you might as well be making $300,000. Yeah. But so. Okay, so what happened with you end up taking a plea? I mean, you can't go to trial.
Yeah, that's stupid. Almost no one that goes to federal court, almost everybody takes a plea of some sort.
Yeah. They've got like a 97% conviction rate.
Unless you got big bucks, you can't fight the government.
No. I always say, look, even if you're guilty, you got a 50% chance of being found. I mean, even if you're not guilty, you have a 50% chance of being found guilty.
Oh yeah.
So what did you end up taking? What was the?
Was it 96 months? It was like just a little over 6 years.
Okay. Did you take RDAP? Was there an RDAP program, a drug program,
to
knock a year off?
I'm not. No,
well, obviously you didn't take it.
They didn't have it. Because they told me, oh, there's no drugs in your case, you don't get this. Oh, okay. And so I got your standard issue good time, 85% or whatever.
Yeah.
And
Did you do all of it? And
I did all of it, and I ended up going back because when I got, I realized that the halfway house was just an extortion, just a way for for someone attached to the government to rob you. I basically said, and I went to my hometown, and when we got down to Jacksonville, they arrested me, took me right back to Butner. And I did the last 6 months in special housing.
Did you get home confinement? I mean, not home. Sorry, you got probation, right?
Yeah.
Supervised release.
Yeah.
How much supervised release?
2 years. And basically, as soon as I got out, I got a job. And after a while, the probation officer didn't even care to see me. They had so many other basket cases bouncing around that part of Florida that the dude that's showing up and working every day, they weren't even worried about me.
Yeah, that's usually
Yeah.
Usually how it goes. If you don't give them any problems,
They don't. Yeah, they'll leave you alone.
they got enough guys giving them problems.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, so you got what are you doing now?
I'm a heavy equipment operator for a construction company in Jacksonville, Petticoat Schmidt. And I've been there 8 years, and I've been in construction for about 15 or 17.
Okay. Yeah, so, I mean, okay. So have you ever talked to the, I know you did an interview when you got out of prison.
Yeah.
But, have you ever seen the FBI agent or spoke with the FBI agent?
I met Mark, the FBI agent, at the premiere of Masterminds, the movie that they did. We just picked up our friendship like before. Met his wife. She was really nice. Took a selfie with me. And I've never wished him any ill will.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he's just,
Yeah.
he's
He
just
was
going
just doing
about-
his job.
Just
Yeah.
doing his job.
And he's one of the few mostly when we think about government employees, we don't think real highly of them. But he was actually out there doing the job that we pay him to do.
Yeah, I was gonna say there were some nasty. There was one really just nasty FBI agent on my case, and the other ones were just like it's kind of like the guards.
Yeah,
it's like the guards that are there that are just like when I'm sorry, the COs when you go to prison, like some of them are just complete sadistic assholes. Yeah, and the other ones are like, listen, man, this is just a job. Like, I just want to come, punch the clock, sit down. Please don't bother me. Yeah. Let me get out. Let me do my thing. Let me go home. Like, those are the guards that are great. Even if they're enforcing the rules. I don't mind that you enforce the rules, but you don't have to be a dick about it. So, yeah, I had some of the Secret Service agents and FBI agents that were totally cool. I was totally cool with them. And then there was this one that was just a complete jerk. He
seems
seemed
like there's
cool.
Always one,
Yeah. Yeah, it's always that's the one that makes them all look bad.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so so why are you in Tampa?
I came down. There's a charity here in Tampa. It's called Forgotten Angels, and they help young people who have timed out on the adoption program. They've gone through their whole life bouncing from house to house. A lot of them, and when they turn 18, the adoption houses, I'm not sure what the correct term is, they don't have anything to do with them. So a lot of them end up out on the street.
Right.
A lot of them turn to drugs or crime or whatever. And this organization works with them, helps them get their GEDs, get some education, get a driver's license, job skills, and they help them get back on their feet. Yeah. And when I heard about it, I'm like, that's something I can get behind. A lot of these people that they're helping never got first chance, and here I am with several chances in my life. And if I can come down here and spend a little money with them, and buy a T-shirt, whatever, and it helps these people, helps these young people, I don't mind it.
Right. I actually wrote a story about a kid named Jacob Diaz, and he was foster care. And when it turned like, I want to say 18 or 19, they basically were like, hey, well, you got to leave next week. And he was like, what?
Yeah, here's the garbage bag. Put your stuff in it. Get out.
And he was just like, he was like, actually, and his foster family was like, he was like, or where he was staying, he was like, everybody was really nice to me, but nobody had even prepared me that this is something that's happening. And he said, I guess I should have known that, but this was my home. And it just one day it was like, hey, bro, next week you're leaving, right? Well, what do you mean I'm leaving? Where am I going? I don't know where you're going, but you can't stay here.
You can't stay here.
Right.
And a lot of those places, the kids that they take in are just a paycheck.
Yeah.
Each kid is valued at whatever, and
when that check ends,
they have no use for you.
Yeah.
And in a country like America, that this goes on, that this happens. And our government screws up a lot, but this could be easily fixed. A program to help, they can improve that program easily.
Yeah, just ease them back into society, get a job, what's funny is there's lots of jobs. Like there's lots of jobs, and there's lots of jobs that you can make a decent living and prepare and take care of yourself, but if you don't even know they're out there and you're not being prepared to kind of acclimate yourself into society or ease yourself into society to just have it thrust upon you. You're not prepared for that as an 18-year-old.
Yeah. And they could do the same thing with the prison system. And I've told people, well, yeah, you want prison to be harsh. Cool. All right. I get that. When they come out, that guy's going to be your neighbor.
Yeah.
What kind of neighbor do you want coming out of there?
Yeah.
Do you want somebody that hasn't really changed? Or you want somebody, like one of my greatest accomplishments when I was in is, and I had to do it on the sly because he was in the Muslim Brotherhood and he wasn't supposed to be associating with us crackers. And I helped this guy, he was better than 40. I helped him learn to read. And to me, that's one of my highest personal accomplishments.
Right.
And granted, he didn't like me. And I had no real reason to like him, but I helped him read.
Well, what's funny is that people want prison to be hard.
Mm-hmm.
People get upset that, for instance, I did an interview with a guy the other day, and somebody in the comments section, because the guy had ended up getting like a master's degree, or was it a master? He got a college degree. I think he was trying to get his master's, but the guy was upset because he had gotten a college education while in prison. Now, granted, the guy had like 20-something, 25. I think he did 25 or 26 years.
Yeah.
So they was upset, like, I can't believe that he's being taken care of and he got an education. And my thought was, the likelihood that he gets an education and gets out of prison and goes back is very low.
Yes.
If he doesn't get the education, there's a damn good chance he goes back to prison.
Oh, yeah.
So are you going to are you bitching about recidivism, or are you going to bitch because you're giving him an education? Because you can only pick one to bitch about. So if you don't give him the education, he goes back, and now you're bitching about him going back to prison.
Yeah.
Or do you let him get a job, become a tax-paying citizen, and not go back to prison?
Yeah.
So pick your battles, bro. And he just did 25 years. Is that not enough for you?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, we talk about that. Me and this guy Boziak. That it really not everybody, but some of the guys talking, and it's the re-entry program is horrible.
Yeah.
Like the idea that like me I got out of prison. Had I not been preparing the entire time while I was in prison to get out of prison, I literally would have gotten out with no money, 7 months halfway house. They're taking, 35% of everything?
Minimum.
Gross.
Yeah.
Gross. So basically you're making less than $1.
Yeah.
Now me, I tried to make it a game to save as much as I could and live, like I ate the bologna sandwiches every day. I ate all the free meals. I never paid. Like you could pay to upgrade and get a hamburger if you wanted to. Like I'm not paying nothing.
Yeah.
So I'm getting the bologna sandwich, whatever you give me for free. I'm sleeping here. I'm going to Walmart and buying the cheapest stuff. And I still got lucky because I happened to have sold an option, and they re-optioned it, and I got a check a couple weeks after I got out. I happened to get a check for a few thousand. If not, I don't know what I would have done.
Oh, yeah.
And I had 7 months to prepare. But you're starting your entire life over.
Yeah.
That's difficult.
And if you don't plan at all, you're screwed.
Oh, yeah. No, if you're not a planner and you're not bright enough to know this is coming, which most people just aren't.
No. And it's not about being smart. It's having, well, it takes a little, but to plan ahead. And if you're not a planner,
right,
then you're done.
Right. And listen, and anybody that thinks that there's some counselor in prison preparing you, like, hey, you need to think about this. You need to listen. Those counselors don't want to see you at all. They despise you.
Oh God, yes. It's obvious too. Yeah. It's like, they're like, oh, well, Mr. Gant, you need to program blah blah blah. I'm like, you want me to take the GED? I graduated high school.
Right.
I've been in the military. I can read, write. I can do advanced math. You've got nothing to offer me. And that they wanted me to work in Unicorp. I'm like,
yeah,
I don't owe y'all a dime. I got angry back at them. I'm like, I don't owe you nothing.
I had a counselor one time tell me that because one of my charges was identity theft. She said, identity theft. She went, she said, I think people like you. Oh, identity theft and fraud. She goes, I think people like you should be strung up by the flagpole. And I said, well, thank God they don't do that.
Yeah.
And she just, and she was just a nasty person. Luckily, over time, she ended up liking me. But for the first 5 years, like 5 years is a long time.
It takes a long time to
win someone over.
Yeah.
You got to be working at it. After 5 years, she started being civil.
Yeah. That's oddly not an uncommon attitude from them.
Yeah.
It's like, we should have probably just shot you. I'm like, jeez. Maybe you should have. It'd been cheaper, but then you'd be out of a job.
I was going to say, it's funny because even the guys we were talking about where I was saying they just come and it's just a job and they leave. Even them, although those are the guards I liked because, they're just enforcing the rules and they have nothing in it. There's no skin in the game. They're still not going to go above and beyond.
No.
And the status quo is make sure they don't, count them, feed them, and that's it. Like as far as preparing them to go back into society, they're like, they're grown men. They'll figure it out. Well, if they could have figured out how to live and function in society to begin with, they probably wouldn't have been here.
Yeah. And this is kind of weird, but I look at people getting out of prison is an untapped resource. These people have shown that they're self-starters. A lot of them are natural entrepreneurs. Why not harness that?
I used to teach the real estate, the ACE courses.
Yeah. I
used to teach the real estate one, and I used to go in there and I would say, listen, real estate is the one thing that you guys can because most of them, 85% of the guys in my class were drug dealers.
Yeah.
I was like, it's the one thing that that the drug dealers, I said, will exceed at.
Yeah.
Because you're hustlers.
Yeah. And they understand that. I was helping a buddy of mine do a math class, and we had 20 or 30 former drug dealers, and they were struggling with fractions. I'm like, dude, you guys have how much is an 8 ball?
Yeah.
Oh, that's an eighth. There you go. You've been using fractions your whole life. And once that clicked in their head, man, they took that next math test and blew it out of the water.
Yeah. I used to love they would say, well, I can't do it. I'm not smart enough to figure this out. I'm like, really?
Really?
You can tell me the starting lineup of the Super Bowl. You can tell me how much all these people make, how much this actor made, or this rap star. You can tell me, the stats for every single person playing in the NBA, but you can't remember this. Stop it, bro. Don't give me that shit. That's a cop out. And eventually, I ended up teaching the SLD class and GED. It was the same thing. I had a guy that I always think this is tragic. I had a guy that had taken the GED and failed it like twice, 2 or 3 times. Not a stupid guy.
Yeah.
Like he couldn't pass the essay portion. So they sat him in a room with me for about a week. We wrote multiple essays. I gave him a very simple formula. He went back and passed the GED, and including the essay portion. And I was always like, that's great. Like, wow, that I did. I know. So I know what you're saying. Like, I felt great about that. He died about 2 weeks later. Massive heart attack. But so it's not a great story.
Yeah, it's not a great story, but
But I hear you.
Yeah.
So, okay. I mean, I feel like I've gotten everything I can get out of you. What? I mean, can you think of anything else you want to say or clear up or?
Well, I think the biggest thing I learned about prison is if you have to go, don't waste your time. Apply yourself. Pick up a book. I spent years reading psychology books, self-help books, and just reading in general, from everything from small engine of repair to science and history. And don't be the guy that spends your time living on your bunk.
Did you kind of have a plan for what you figured you were going to do when you get out?
I had a general idea that I wasn't going back to North Carolina, and I wanted to get away from anything that had to do with security, and I wanted to work outside, and I just wanted to change my life. And so that's why I started looking at psychology books and self-help books, and I had to fix Dave first before that, or everything else would fail.
Okay. I mean, trust me, I feel the same way. Like when I started writing, my memoir, writing in my memoir and reading about writing and reading about the things in your past have helped shape you, and reading about that makes you do a lot of self-reflection. And to me, that's like, at that point, I had I would say it was like a fundamental shift in my attitude. I went from it was everybody else's fault to, no, it's my fault.
It's my fault.
I fucked up.
I screwed up.
Right.
And then you have to go, okay, well, where do I fix this?
Right. Why did I fuck?
Why am I a walking can of worms?
Right.
And then figure it out.
Yeah. I have a buddy, Pete, who always says, you cannot come to prison and continue to behave the way you did prior to prison and not expect to come back.
Yeah.
And then that was really kind of like, I took that to heart. And so, yeah, now I'm here with you. This was David Gant's story. And I appreciate you coming by, obviously. And I appreciate you guys watching. And do me a favor, check out my Patreon. All of the links to my books are in the description box. See ya. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but when I was locked up, I wrote a whole bunch of true crime books, and all of the books are on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, Audible, they're ebooks. Check out the trailers.
Using forgeries and bogus identities, Matthew B. Cox, one of the most ingenious con men in history, built America's biggest banks out of millions. Despite numerous encounters with bank security, state, and federal authorities, Cox narrowly, and quite luckily, avoided capture for years. Eventually, he topped the U.S. Secret Service's most wanted list and led the U.S. Marshals, FBI, and Secret Service on a 3-year chase, while jet-setting around the world with his attractive female accomplices. Cox has been declared one of the most prolific mortgage fraud con artists of all time by CNBC's American Greed. Bloomberg Businessweek called him the mortgage industry's worst nightmare, while Dateline NBC described Cox as a gifted forger and silver-tongued liar. Playboy magazine proclaimed his scam was real estate fraud, and he was the best. Shark in the Housing Pool is Cox's exhilarating first-person account of his stranger-than-fiction story. Available now on Amazon and Audible.
Bent is the story of John J. Boziak's phenomenal life of crime. Inked from head to toe, with an addiction to strippers and fast Cadillacs, Boziak was not your typical computer geek. He was, however, one of the most cunning scammers, counterfeiters, identity thieves, and escape artists alive, and a major thorn in the side of the U.S. Secret Service as they fought a war on cybercrime. With a savant-like ability to circumvent banking security and stay one step ahead of law enforcement, Boziak made millions of dollars in the international cyber underworld, with the help of the Chinese and the Russians. Then, leaving nothing but a John Doe warrant and a cleaned-out bank account in his wake, he vanished. Boziak's stranger-than-fiction tale of ingenious scams and impossible escapes, of brazen run-ins with the law and secret desires to straighten out and settle down, makes his story a true crime con game that will keep you guessing. Bent: How a Homeless Teen Became One of the Cybercrime Industry's Most Prolific Counterfeiters. Available now on Amazon and Audible.
Buried by the U.S. government and ignored by the national media, this is the story they don't want you to know. When Frank Amadeo met with President George W. Bush at the White House to discuss NATO operations in Afghanistan, no one knew that he'd already embezzled nearly $200 million from the federal government, money he intended to use to bankroll his plan to take over the world. From Amadeo's global headquarters in the shadow of Florida's Disney World, with a nearly inexhaustible supply of the Internal Revenue Service's funds, Amadeo acquired multiple businesses, amassing a mega conglomerate. Driven by his delusions of world conquest, he negotiated the purchase of a squadron of American fighter jets and the controlling interest in a former Soviet ICBM factory. He began working to build the largest private militia on the planet, over 1 million Africans strong. Simultaneously, Amadeo hired an international black ops force to orchestrate a coup in the Congo, while plotting to take over several small Eastern European countries. The most disturbing part of it all is, had the U.S. government not thwarted his plans, he might have just pulled it off. It's insanity, the bizarre, true story of a bipolar megalomaniac's insane plan for total world domination. Available now on Amazon and Audible.
Pierre Rossini, in the 1990s, was a 20-something-year-old Los Angeles-based drug trafficker of ecstasy and ice. He and his associates drove luxury European supercars, lived in Beverly Hills penthouses, and dated Playboy models while dodging federal indictments. Then, two FBI officers with the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force entered the picture. Dirty agents willing to fix cases and identify informants. Suddenly, two of Rossini's associates, confidential informants working with federal law enforcement, were murdered. Everyone pointed to Rossini. As his co-defendants prepared for trial, U.S. Attorney Robert Mueller sat down to debrief Rossini at Leavenworth Penitentiary, and another story emerged. A tale of FBI corruption and complicity in murder. You see, Pierre Rossini knew something that no one else knew. The truth. And Robert Mueller and the federal government have been covering it up to this very day. Devil Exposed. A twisted tale of drug trafficking, corruption, and murder in the City of Angels. Available on Amazon and Audible.
Bailout is a psychological true crime thriller that pits a narcissistic conman against an egotistical, pathological liar. Marcus Schrinker, the money manager who attempted to fake his own death during the 2008 financial crisis, is about to be released from prison, and he's ready to talk. He's ready to tell you the story no one's heard. Schrinker sits down with true crime writer Matthew B. Cox, a fellow inmate serving time for bank fraud. Schrinker lays out the details. The disgruntled clients who persecuted him for unanticipated market losses, the affair that ruined his marriage, and the treachery of his scorned wife, the woman who framed him for securities fraud, leaving him no choice but to make a bogus distress call and plunge from his multi-million-dollar private aircraft in the dead of night. The $11.1 million in life insurance, the missing $1.5 million in gold. The fact is, Schrinker wants you to think he's innocent. The problem is, Cox knows Schrinker's a pathological liar and his story's a fabrication. As Cox subtly coaxes, cajoles, and yes, cons Shrinker into revealing his deceptions, his stranger-than-fiction life of lies slowly unravels. This is the story Shrinker didn't want you to know. Bailout: The Life and Lies of Marcus Shrinker. Available now on Barnes & Noble, Etsy, and Audible.
Matthew B. Cox is a con man, incarcerated in the Federal Bureau of Prisons for a variety of bank fraud-related scams. Despite not having a drug problem, Cox inexplicably ends up in the prison's Residential Drug Abuse Program, known as RDAP. A drug program in name only, RDAP is an invasive behavior modification therapy specifically designed to correct the cognitive thinking errors associated with criminal behavior. The program is a non-fiction dark comedy which chronicles Cox's side-splitting journey. This first-person account is a fascinating glimpse at the survivor-like atmosphere inside of the government-sponsored rehabilitation unit. While navigating the treachery of his backstabbing peers, Cox simultaneously manipulates prison policies and the bumbling staff every step of the way. The program: How a Con Man Survived the Federal Bureau of Prisons' Cult of RDAP. Available now on Amazon and Audible.
If you saw anything you like, links to all the books are in the description box.